Okay, so over here in our test, victorizing data section of the n8n sales coach, we have a transcript and a call summary that I've imported here. Obviously, this is dummy data. And if I trigger this workflow, we are inputting all of this information here into a vector database within Superbase. And then we are letting the designated person within the Superbase know that the call has been analyzed. So you can see if I go over here, we've gotten a message saying, Kaiki Rivero, your call has been analyzed and I'm ready to coach you. So this means I can start, texting this code to analyze the call that I've just had. And the call that I just had was with a person named Sarah, as you can see over here. And in this summary over here, I just put this in for you to see that this was a disastrous call with Bloomwell in a studio. And, just didn't overcome the objection. So we are just going to ask the agent about this and see if they can actually help us. So we're going to say, my call with Sarah. So we should expect a reply back from the agent. So it's obviously double checking the date of the call with Sarah because it wants to make sure it pulls in the corrected data from that Superbase vector database. And I will just say the call was today. So now it's giving me a general breakdown of the call to start off, saying that I started off strong, asking about the current outreach, and she's doing social media and running word of mouth for marketing. It was open about her limitations, about 2 to 3 new clients a month. And I mentioned the price was around this range over here, but I seemed a bit uncertain and struggled to clearly define what was included. So Sarah pushed back, calling it expensive. So, from this point, the AI has already captured that it didn't go too well. And then at the end here, it's saying, now from your side, how do you think you did handling pricing and qualifying up front? So I've obviously said something that doesn't go well with like what a sales coach should say, right? So I said I didn't feel confident and I probably should have made it cheaper. So let's say what the coach says, what do you think was your missed shot in the moment? And if you could go back and ask one follow-up question on the price there, what would it be? So obviously it's just coaching me, and from the perspective of how I performed the call, it's not just dumping a whole bunch of information, which is what I really like about this agent. Just cut the chase and said, I'm not sure, what should I have actually said? And the agent has now pulled up information that we've victorized about like actual sales knowledge. This is all coming up from Hormozi's sales course, talking about what I should have actually done. So first up, I should not have freaked out. And it told me like, don't freak out or feel you gotta chop the price right off. That's expensive isn't always a firm no. So now it's giving me actionable steps to improve my sales call in that particular context. So acknowledge what they said. Yeah, I hear that price can feel steep sometimes. Associate it. Then ask something to keep the convo going. So this is actually coming from Hormozi's AAA concept. So that means that it has successfully pulled out information and is able to coach us in a conversational way without just dumping ideas like you would in ChatGPT or something else. So if you couldn't tell here, I built an entire sales coach that analyzes meeting transcripts and then coaches me in real time to improve my sales ability. And today I'll show you exactly how I built this whole thing using n8n so that by the end, you can access the entire templates in the description using the link to download everything. So I'll first walk you guys through like the Figma board to show you how it works. And then we'll go into this deep dive of the technical build itself. I'm trying to keep this video as valuable as possible, so let's dive straight in. Alright, so what the sales coach system actually does is that once the call actually finishes on a platform like Fireflies or Otter AI or anything like that, if you don't know what those are AI note-taking platforms for your online meetings. So once those calls actually finish up, we uploaded the transcript to the Superbase and we victorize everything under the closer's name. And then we get that closer's information to notify them and send them a WhatsApp message to start the conversation. So this actually means that we can have multiple people under the same system within Superbase, and I'll show you guys how that is possible in a second. And then there's a separate kind of like part of the workflow, which is a webhook that triggers on WhatsApp. We pull in the latest data via the phone number, which is all the data that is stored from Superbase, and then we start the conversation from there. And then the agent has the context of not only the conversation that we've just had with the sales call, but it can also extract sales coach knowledge from a separate knowledge base that is vectorized and then give us actionable advice. The way you get meeting transcripts here in the first place is you just go into your Fireflies or anything like that. You search up n8n on the apps tab down here, and then from that you click get API key. Dummy. And then from that point, you get a tab that looks a little bit like this. And then you can just put in your n8n webhook over here. And you can also connect it using the API as well. And the implications of this are so powerful because you can do so many things with that data, which is what I'm showing you here today. Okay, so first things first, we are getting everything into this webhook over here. So this is obviously dummy data that I've gotten into this transcript. You usually have, actionable items and like all of these insights, but we can just do a lot of things just from the transcript itself, and it's probably better for the AI to focus on. So if I come over here, you can see that I pulled everything, dummy data again from Claude AI. I just asked it to give me a whole bunch of different kind of scenarios of the sales call because that's what we're going to be analyzing it from. And so we pulled that into n8n. The summary step here is literally for you guys to see what the call was without having to read like this entire transcript. So once we do that, we then go into this OpenAI node over here, and we are using the 4.1 mini model to give it a few messages over here. So first we have the system message saying that you're a helpful classifying assistant. And then the task over here is saying that it is meant to analyze the meeting transcript to check if it was a sales call between the closer and the prospect. So obviously this won't go through if it's not a sales call in the first place. If it's just like a project update call, then we won't get it, going through the workflow, which is great. So then we identify the closers by their full name and then the prospect's first name, because in the data that we get from the transcript, we get the first name of the closer as well as the other person that's connected to the call. So that helps us be really dynamic with what we do with the data in n8n itself. And the specifics we have output everything in JSON in this format, and that's like the sales call, the closer name, and then also the prospect name from the call if it is identified. Specifically only output yes or no for a sales call, and if it equals to no, then we don't push it further down the workflow. And then if it is a sales call, I'll output also the full name of the closer from Blue Horizon AI. The answer should either be Kaiki Rivera or Donna Kahand, which is obviously like the only two people in our organization who are going to be taking sales calls. But here, when you download everything in the templates, you can just change these names here because the AI will look at the first names and it will compare that against the information that you feed it here in this prompt. So that's really important over there. And then from that point, we obviously check the entire, JSON structure that we have fed into it. I guess an important point that I had to put in here was output the content as JSON, because then we can map the different outputs from that one OpenAI node. And then we are mapping the response for the sales call. And it only goes through if that equals to yes. From here, we are uploading everything into Supabase. So we have a huge database. Well, not huge, but we have a few things going on here in this database. We have the sales reps where we just put in information about the closes. Obviously, I just have myself on there. The n8n chat histories, which I'll show you how I set up in a second. But then what we're doing here is we're going to the transcripts sector in specific, and we are vectorizing the entire call into this database over here, into this table here. And this is the output that we get. So obviously chunked down versions of the transcript that we can just look at. And for each of these, we include metadata. So this is how the agent is actually able to find the specific information for each call. So if I say, analyze my call from X date, then it's going to go over here. And then obviously a little feature that I added in as well is the prospect name. So we can search for things also under the prospect's name. From Fireflies in the first place, not just a particular call date if you have multiple calls. So that's a cool feature that I added in there. I'll go into more detail about how to set it up in a second, but that's what we're doing. We're chucking that whole information into Supabase. We're using this OpenAI embeddings model over here, this default data uploader, and then we're just mapping the data that comes from the transcript. So that's what the output looks like over there, the entire transcript, and then also metadata. So these little tags that we kind of filter through to see the kind of type of call that it was without the AI having to go through like all of these different chunks. It's just like little tags that say what call should you be looking for. We are identifying that through the name of the closer, obviously the call date, and then the prospect name. So that really refines it down so we know, so the AI knows exactly what to look for within that vector database. Once we go through this step, we are then going to that sales rep details tab. We are getting the all of the values for the closer name. So you'll see one of the outputs for the AI was the full closer name, which is what we asked it to output. And in this run, you saw that it came out with Kaiki Rivera. And so we just map that value because the name of the reps that we have in Superbase are our full names as well. So if it says Kaiki Rivero, then it outputs all of this information, including my phone number, which is what we'll use to message them on WhatsApp, okay? And so we just map over here the phone number from that output, and then the message saying, hey, name, your call has been analyzed and I'm ready to coach you. So that's how we do that. And here I just have a limit node because we have a whole bunch of items that come from Superbase. And if this isn't there, then it's going to send me 5 messages as opposed to 1. That's kind of how it works. So we just have a limit node there. So it only sends 1 message to say when everything is ready, the agent is actually prepared to coach us. By the way, if you're a business owner and you'd like to see any version of this that is more advanced, operating in real time within your business, then you can contact me using the link in the description. I have an agency called Blue Horizon AI where we sit down with people, we find out more about their problems and how we can help them, and then we provide custom-made solutions like the ones that you see today in this video. So if that sounds like you, then you can contact me directly using the link in the description. Back to the video. All right, now getting to the super interesting part of the whole automation and how that works is connecting it to WhatsApp and then being able to pull in designated data from both the sales coach knowledge as well as the general transcript code that we have acquired. So obviously connecting WhatsApp is a first step. You need a whole setup with Facebook developers and then getting that API connection within n8n. So I'm not going to go through that today, but if you do want, I have made a live video which I'll connect up here for you to check out, where I show that step by step. But after we've made this connection, there's two sort of things going on. The first one is the trigger, which receives information, and then we are outputting that again as another message, which is just going to be the output of the agent. Now, I'm not going to show the prompt first. First, I'm actually going to show you the whole Superbase setup and how that works. And then when I show the prompt, it'll you have a better understanding. Everything will connect itself a lot clearer for you. So I guess without further ado, here's the Superbase. We've got a few different tabs here, and I'll show you how I made them in a second. So firstly, it's obviously the sales reps one. This is just a very simple database where I can just have the users of this app and with their information, which is going to be pulled in from that first step that I showed you guys to actually be able to send out the first message. Now you can obviously put in as many people as you want because the identifier is going to be this OpenAI step over here. But that is the first tab within Superbase. The second one that I want to touch on here is the transcripts call. Now for all 3 of these, we pretty much have a very similar process. But what I did is I went into the documentation within the Superbase. And in here, it tells you exactly what you need to do in order to be able to create these vector databases within Superbase itself. So if we scroll down to quick start for setting up vector store, it'll give us the exact code that we need and what I did here in Superbase. So if I want to click, just make any sort of vector database within that, this is the code that I need, and I'll show you exactly how I did that. So within Superbase, we have to go to SQL editor. We can just click a create table within the templates over here. And then once we do that, you just want to get rid of all of this, and then you can copy and paste that whole vector. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to create an extension vector. If you already have that in your Superbase downloaded, then you can just delete these first lines over here. But then if you don't have this vector, then you need to keep that on. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a table, and then every time it says the documents, we want to change that to the name of the actual table that we want to have in there. So for example, I had transcripts over there, but if I want to make another one called database, what I can do is change all of these to database. So literally wherever it says documents, I'm going to change that to database. Then we're going to create a function which will be the embedding vectors to match what we're trying to do here. So let me just take a second to change all of these to database. So now that I've done that, I can just click run, and we should be expecting a success. All right, so again, I just made this mistake myself. I obviously already have a vector, so I need to get rid of that. But now that I've done all these changes, I can click run, and we should be expecting a new table. So we have got a success. We can go back into our table editor, and we have a new database vector store here, which we can then go back and map from n8n. And you'll see that each of these has an ID, a contents tab, and then a metadata. And then also the embedding. And once you actually fill this up, it'll look something like this. And obviously, this is the transcripts one where we put everything in. Now, this is the result of the first upload that we put to Superbase. So this is where we add the transcript. And over here is where I put in, that concise information, all of that information with metadata and everything. And we do that by turning on metadata. But then down here, we are getting that. So once we've created that database, we've got this vector store node here, and we're describing the table name and then also describing the tool to the agent. We are able to list the exact table that we need, and then we just make sure that we include metadata to fetch, because the query name will be matched transcripts, again, matching that table, and then we map the name, which is going to be the result of the name that we receive from the WhatsApp trigger, so whoever is texting. This will allow us to see exactly that information that comes up for that designated name when we fetch those recent calls. And then the AI will be able to distinguish which ones we actually need. So here's an example where the AI actually ran this and used that node there. We can see that the query was the date plus the name of the prospect. The metadata that we have automatically going is the name of the lead. And then we receive only the information that we have vectorized from the call with Sarah specifically. So that makes this really powerful, and with metadata we can automatically filter out all the data that isn't appended to that specific data set. So in this case, the person that was on the call, okay? We do the exact same thing with the sales coach one, but the difference is the sales coach is not dynamic. So we don't ask it to fetch any new information. So I've got this little workflow on the side here, which is literally taking in the coach knowledge that is coming from the Google Drive. So we are getting the Alex Hormozi video where he talks about all of the sales tactics. And what we're doing, if we run that, we are just uploading it straight into the sales coach tab, vectorizing everything. And then again, we're using this embedding model, the same data loader as before. And if you're wondering what this recursive character text splitter is, it's just the criteria that it decides to chunk the information that comes in. So you can just have it as 1,000 and then 200 over here. Don't worry too much about that. But essentially, when we input the sales coach data, we can then output it so we can retrieve that information when the agent executes this tool. So again, just like before, we create that table with the exact same command, but instead we have it to sales coach, which means that we can retrieve the specific sales coach data. In this case, we're just looking for the generic information that is instilled within that whole table. And you can see here in the query, the AI inputted the exact information, so the exact situation that we were describing to the AI about the call. So obviously about pricing objections and how to overcome that. Once the query is inputted into that vector database, we output all of this information about handling prices from our knowledge base. And then the AI simply picks the best one. We have a limit of 4 over here. And that is how it uses the information there to respond to us in the highest quality way possible. Just as a side note as well, what you can do in n8n is you can have the same embedding model. So the same thing that kind of puts in this coordinates of the embedding in the executions with the agent. They both use the same embeddings model with OpenAI. Then we have this Postgres chat memory, which is integrated within Superbase itself. Now that one's a little bit different, but it's very simple again. All they need to do is connect it over here, and then we got to make sure that we have that transaction pooler. This gives you all the parameters necessary to connect Postgres, and then just like that, if once you connect it, we'll have an n8n chat histories table automatically created. So that's how that table is made. We are using an OpenAI chat model, but I just put in the Anthropic chat one in case you have different preferences of how the agent likes to speak. And then here we finally have the prompt, right? So you can see in this user message, we are giving it the live, user that is texting the agent so it knows who to search for, as well as the message that user is giving you in real time. So then the system message here is a role saying that it is an expert sales coach with a knack for training sales reps. The task is to confirm the date of the call they would like to be trained on, use the tools at their disposal for the context of their call, as well as the information on the sales coach database. And then we have this specific section here where we outline specifically the step-by-step of how the agent should act. So always asking the date, just making sure that the date is clarified so that we can input it as metadata when we use our query. We also use the tools. And then these following steps here, which you can just pause the video to walk yourself through. But then the main thing that I want to touch on here is the specific tools that I've named here. So the get call data and then the get coach data. which we're going to be using to be retrieving obviously all the information. So I said here that this is a rag responsible for retrieving targeted info from the call, and the coach data is a rag responsible for retrieving information from the sales knowledge base. And then here I have notes saying to develop the conversation between criticizing and making fixes, to use Spartan language and slang to appeal to the user more. And then I give it the real date, specified to Pacific Auckland, because this will help the agent understand what the date that it should be looking for within the transcripts database is. That is essentially how the build runs. Once we activate this entire workflow, we can chat back and forth to the agent without having to trigger it manually each time. We are retrieving constantly the information that we have put into the n8n chat histories over here via the identifier of their specific phone number. So that's how the agent can remember our information, and it uses that information to output it back into the WhatsApp. We have a recipient's phone number, and then from that we have a text body as well to map out the exact output, and then the conversation just goes back and forth from that point. That is it for the video today. As mentioned before, everything in this has been templated into the downloadable link in the description below for you. So that means if you have any further questions about the build that you'd like to know, then you can comment down below and I'll be happy to help in any way that I can. But essentially that's it. I hope this was valuable, and I'll see you in the next one.